Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today our mission is, well, let's try and cut through the noise. We want to figure out what it really costs to launch a health tech product in 2026. A compliant one, a functional one. So we're doing a financial and technical deep dive into the minimum viable product, the MVP, specifically for healthcare. And look, if you're maybe coming from building consumer apps where, maybe an MVP costs you $30,000, you need a serious recalibration here. Building for healthcare means you're immediately facing tough regulations like HIPAA, strict data privacy rules, and really complex system integration right from the get-go. It isn't just like optional stuff you add later, it's mandatory. A barrier to entry.
Yeah, it's basically the highest bar you can imagine in the software world. Seriously. And
Right.
if we look at 2026 now, the whole meaning of viable has shifted completely. You're not just building a quick prototype anymore, like a proof of concept. No, you are building a secure, compliant, integrated system. And it has to work for, well, at least three, often four different groups right away. Patients, doctors, insurers, regulators sometimes. That inherent complexity needed on day one. That's what fundamentally jacks up the price. It's structural.
Okay, let's unpack that then. What are those specific things, those non-negotiables that make a healthcare MVP so different from, say, a standard fintech app or something? What are the, four or five things that absolutely have to be there?
Well, the first one, and yeah, probably the most expensive, is compliance and security. Think IPA. It mandates really strict encryption, very granular access control, who sees what, and comprehensive audit trails. Everything logged. You can't just, slap a disclaimer on it and call it a day. The entire architecture has to be built around security from the ground up.
So it's not a bolt-on feature later.
No, absolutely not. It's baked in, and that immediately multiplies the cost. Second, you hit the gauntlet of integration with legacy systems. Your shiny new product almost always needs to talk to the systems already running in clinics and hospitals. We're talking electronic health records, EHRs, like Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, the big ones.
Right.
Interfacing with those huge, often proprietary systems, plus maybe billing systems, lab systems. It's notoriously complex, time-consuming.
And I imagine it often needs specialized tech people just to figure out their APIs. That adds straight to labor costs.
Precisely. Big time. Third, many MVPs now need some level of clinical validation even before they can do a wide pilot. If your product touches, say, diagnosis or suggests treatments, well, that adds a whole regulatory and testing phase. You just don't see that in standard tech development.
Another layer of complexity and cost.
Exactly. And finally, that complexity we mentioned, it creates complex user flows. You're building separate, secure pathways for lots of different users. Doctors logging in securely, nurses needing access to certain charts, patients seeing their appointment data. Each interface needs to be secure, compliant. It makes the UX design and the back-end authorization way more elaborate than your typical app with just one user type.
It sounds like we're not just talking about adding a few security layers. It feels like a completely different basic requirement for just functionality. Has all that pressure, the regulation, the complexity, has it actually changed the standard definition of an MVP in health tech over, say, the last few years? I mean, how different is 2026 compared to maybe 2018?
Oh, the shift is remarkable, honestly. And it's the main reason budgets have just, exploded.
Yeah.
If you look back at the 2018 to 2022 era, the scope was often genuinely a simple prototype. Just enough to prove a concept. But today, 2026, the expectation is a pilot-ready build, something that can actually handle real patient data securely from the start. And compliance, that shifted too. It went from just HIPAA basics, kind of check the box, to needing HIPAA by design. That means encryption, audit logging, secure infrastructure, they have to be mandatory defaults. Baked right into the code structure itself, not an afterthought.
What about connecting to things? I remember early health MVPs often just aimed to connect to maybe one specific hospital's EHR system, often through some limited, expensive direct link.
Yeah, that's largely gone. The expectation now is FHIR first. You leverage the modern standardized protocol, fast healthcare interoperability resources. FHIR makes integrating with multiple EHRs and even claims data much more feasible, more effective long-term. But it does increase the initial build complexity because you're aiming for real interoperability from the get-go.
Right, it's a higher standard to meet initially.
Definitely. And of course, the tech itself is more demanding. AI back then was maybe some experimental machine learning. Now, it's escalating to practical AI. People expect features like automated patient triage, maybe data summaries for busy doctors, or even immediate risk prediction right there in the MVP, delivering instant, real value.
That is quite a list of new expectations.
Oh.
Which I guess brings us to the shocking part on cost. What did this whole shift do to the budgets and timelines?
Yeah, the cost difference is really the headline here. Where simple timelines might have been, say, 8 to 16 weeks, now we're realistically looking at 12 to 24 weeks just for a basic compliant build, and easily 24 to 40 weeks for something with significant integration or AI.
Double or triple the time potentially.
Easily. And the cost jump is parallel. Budgets that, might have comfortably sat between US $30,000, maybe $120,000, they're now starting at $50,000 for the absolute bare minimum, and frequently stretching up to US $500,000 or even more for projects with deep integration and those advanced AI features. Yeah. The days of the cheap healthcare MVP, they are definitively over.
$500,000 just for an MVP.
Yeah.
That's a serious investment. Okay. So if those necessary integrations and regulations are the why, what does that actually look like on the, the line item spreadsheet? Let's drill down. What technical choices are really driving that final bill? When you're budgeting, you obviously have to start with the scope and features, what's actually in it. So line items would include things like really robust user authentication, authorization systems built for multi-factor security, not just simple logins. You need specialized clinical data management, stuff capable of handling protected health information, PHI. So prescriptions, secure charts, treatment plans, all handled carefully. If you had telemedicine, well, now you're budgeting for high PA-compliant video, secure scheduling features, and maybe integrating those AI-driven insights we talked about, like triage algorithms to help figure out which patient needs attention first.
Exactly. And every single one of those features, every single one, is governed by the regulatory line items. Beyond just IPEA, which is already exhaustive, if your app could be seen as a diagnostic tool or something that actively influences patient care, you might also be facing the expense and time of seeking FDA clearance.
Right, another potential hurdle.
And don't forget the global angle.
Yeah.
If you have any plans to handle data from Europe, well, GDPR compliance is another huge factor. And that has to be baked in from the initial architecture design. Adds layers of complexity around data storage, user rights, data transfer.
Okay, and then there are those integration needs you mentioned earlier, the notoriously expensive ones. Connecting to Epic or Cerner isn't simple, is it? It needs specialized connectors, often subscription fees, dedicated developer time, just making sure the data mapping is right and secure.
Absolutely. And that also includes connecting to specialized billing systems for insurance claims. Or increasingly, integrating with APIs for wearable devices, think smartwatches, fitness trackers, to pull in patient vitals in real time. More data, more complexity.
And running all this,
Phew.
it's not basic web hosting.
No way. The complexity demands a specialized technology stack and team. You need robust, modern languages. Sure, React, Node.js, Python are common, but crucially, you must rely on secure cloud infrastructure. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, specifically using their pre-certified HIPAC compliant environments. That helps manage the compliance burden, but it costs more. And the people. The talent required for the secure backend engineers, compliance specialists, maybe AI and machine learning experts, they command a premium salary. It all adds up.
Knowing those figures are so high, I mean, it sounds pretty intimidating for anyone starting out. But I guess knowing the numbers helps you plan. Can we give the listener a kind of a practical reality check, some concrete costs and time ranges based on that complexity scale?
Absolutely. It's really important. The complexity level maps pretty directly to your time and budget. So the basic MVP. This is likely in the range of, say, 6 to 12 weeks of work. And cost-wise, you're looking at roughly $10,000 to $50,000. But this is truly the bare minimum. Think simple apps, maybe a very basic telemedicine scheduler with compliant video, but little or no integration with existing EHRs. Very focused.
Right, that's the one that really requires ruthless feature control. Keep it super simple.
It is, exactly. Then you step up to the intermediate MVP. Now you're looking at 12 to 24 weeks, and the cost is probably $50,000 to $150,000. This is where most patient portals tend to sit, or maybe chronic care management apps. They need moderate complexity. Usually some basic EHR integration is required here. You'll also need a more polished user experience and often some rudimentary practical AI, perhaps like a secure chatbot for patient questions.
Okay, so more features, more integration, higher cost. Makes sense.
And then finally, there's the advanced MVP. This requires serious commitment. You're talking 24 to 40 weeks of development time. And the cost. It starts around $150,000 and can easily climb to $500,000, sometimes even more. This is for projects doing deep EHR integration, advanced AI or machine learning, maybe for image recognition or predictive analytics, plus comprehensive wearable device connectivity. It's the full package, built to a high standard.
That $500,000 mark again.
Yeah, and these tiers, they're really critical planning tools. It's worth noting, too, that specialized tools like the healthcare MVP cost calculator mentioned in some sources actually exist now. They can help innovators tailor these estimates based on their specific needs for integration, compliance, features. But you absolutely need to know which tier you're aiming for before you write a single line of code. It dictates everything.
These figures are definitely daunting. Let's say I'm aiming for that intermediate MVP, maybe targeting 150K. What's the single biggest trap I could fall into for cost overrun, and how do I avoid it? We need to talk optimization strategies. How do you build this necessary complexity without completely breaking the bank?
That's a great question. The biggest trap. It's often scope creep, but specifically scope creep driven by a fear of non-compliance. Innovators sometimes try to build absolutely everything right away, thinking it makes them safer or more compliant, but that's counterproductive for an MVP. So the first optimization strategy directly fights this. Prioritize core features. Ruthlessly. Focus only on the absolute minimum needed to validate your core clinical concept or value proposition. If a feature doesn't directly prove that core idea, it doesn't belong in the MVP, cut it. Be brutal.
Makes sense. Focus is key. And how you actually build it matters too, right?
Absolutely. Second strategy. Adopt agile methodology. Use sprints, iterative progress, constant feedback loops with actual users, clinicians, patients. This dramatically reduces the risk of building expensive features that nobody actually needs or wants. It ensures every development dollar is spent productively on validated needs.
Okay. What else? Any technical shortcuts that are safe?
Well, not shortcuts, but smart choices. Third, use open source tools wisely. You don't need to reinvent the wheel for everything. Standard features like authentication, encryption libraries, certain data processing tools there are robust, well-maintained open source options available. Leveraging those can save significant development time and therefore cost. Just vet them carefully for security and maintenance.
Right. And leaning on the big players for infrastructure.
Exactly. Fourth, leverage cloud solutions. Use those pre-certified HIPAA-compliant cloud platforms we mentioned, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. By doing that, you effectively bypass the huge time and expense of building and certifying your own secure, regulatory-compliant physical infrastructure from scratch. You're outsourcing a big chunk of that immediate compliance burden to them. It's usually much more efficient.
Good point. And what about the team itself?
That leads to the fifth strategy. Outsource wisely. For really specialized, intensive tasks, maybe the initial security architecture setup, tricky FHIR integration, or developing a sophisticated AI model, it's often far more cost-effective, especially early on, to contract a specialist agency or consultant for that specific phase, rather than trying to hire a full-time, very expensive in-house expert who might only be critical for a short part of the MVP build.
Smart resource allocation.
Precise.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think the main takeaway here is that building a healthcare MVP in 2026, a modern one, it really demands strategic investment. It's driven primarily by these mandatory security, compliance, and integration needs. You should probably plan for costs starting around $50, but escalating pretty rapidly towards that $500K mark or even higher. And it really depends entirely on how many complex legacy systems you need to connect with and how much intelligence, like AI, you need to bake in from the start.
Yeah, and that tension, between the high initial cost and achieving long-term interoperability, that really feels like the defining challenge for 2026. So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering just how much expense is driven by the current, often rigid regulatory landscape, IPA, FDA potentially, how might the industry's pushed towards more standardized open data exchange, specifically through broader FHIR adoption? How might that eventually shift the financial balance? Will easier data access ultimately reduce that initial MVP development cost? Or will the complexity and the cost just shift towards ensuring the absolute security and privacy of that now more easily accessible health data? It's a really critical question, I think, for every healthcare innovator to wrestle with as they plan their next move.